She went to a masquerade ball and spent the night with a mysterious man. The next day, before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The Charlotte metro rattled gently as Naomi Bennett stared at her reflection in the window, her blonde braids swaying with each movement of the train. The lo-fi beats flowing through her earbuds created a cocoon of tranquility around her, a shield against the Monday morning chaos. Her honey-brown eyes looked tired, but they still held that warmth that made patients at the dental clinic feel at ease the moment they walked in. "Just another day," she whispered to herself, adjusting the strap of her sensible black bag. Inside, carefully folded, lay an invitation that shouldn't have been hers, an elegant cream-colored card with gold lettering that her best friend Olivia had thrust into her hands last night. "You're going," Olivia had declared, her tone brooking no argument. "I have an extra ticket, and you haven't done anything fun in forever. It's a masquerade ball, Naomi. Nobody will know who you are. You can just be." The memory of that conversation made Naomi's stomach flutter. 2 years of carefully constructed routine threatened to crack under the weight of possibility. She'd built this life methodically after escaping her last relationship. A 9-to-5 job at Bright Smiles Dental, a small but cozy apartment in a decent neighborhood, and a savings account that grew by tiny increments. Safe, predictable, secure. The train lurched to a stop at her station, and Naomi merged into the stream of commuters, her practical heels clicking against the concrete. The morning air held that peculiar Charlotte crispness that meant autumn was finally settling in, and she pulled her jacket closer. At the clinic's front desk, Naomi settled into her familiar routine: schedule appointments, file insurance claims, smile at nervous patients, keep track of every detail in her neat handwriting. But today her mind kept drifting to the invitation tucked away in her bag, like a secret burning a hole in her consciousness. "Miss Bennett?" Dr. Rodriguez's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Could you help Mrs. Davidson with her insurance forms?" "Of course, doctor." Naomi's smile was automatic, professional, practiced. She'd gotten good at wearing masks long before any masquerade ball. The day crawled by, each hour marked by the steady tick of the wall clock above her desk. At lunch, she did what she always did, took out her small notebook and recorded every expense from the morning. Coffee, $2.75, metro fare, $2.50. The routine of tracking each penny grounded her, reminded her why she couldn't afford dreams bigger than this. But as the afternoon sun slanted through the clinic's windows, casting long shadows across her desk, Naomi found herself opening her phone's browser. Interior design courses at the local community college glowed on her screen, a dream she'd bookmarked so many times but never dared to click through. "You should apply," a voice startled her. It was Katie, one of the dental hygienists, peering over her shoulder. "I've seen your apartment, Naomi. You have an eye for this stuff." Naomi quickly closed the tab. "Maybe someday," she said, the words tasting familiar and bitter on her tongue. How many times had she said that? Maybe someday. Maybe when she had more money. Maybe when she felt braver. Maybe when the memory of him telling her she'd never amount to anything stopped echoing in her head. The rest of the workday passed in a blur of appointments and paperwork. Before she knew it, Naomi was back on the metro heading home. But instead of her usual stop, she found herself staying on, riding to the boutique district where Olivia worked. The bell chimed softly as she pushed open the door to Luxe, the high-end clothing store where her friend was assistant manager. Olivia looked up from behind the counter, her face breaking into a knowing grin. "You're going to say yes," she declared, coming around to hug Naomi. "I can see it in your eyes." "I don't have anything to wear," Naomi protested weakly, but Olivia was already pulling her toward the back room. "Remember that midnight blue gown that came in last month? The one that made you gasp? I've been hiding it in your size. And don't worry about the price. It's last season, so my discount will make it manageable." Naomi's throat tightened as Olivia unveiled the dress. The fabric seemed to flow like water, deep blue catching the light in ways that reminded her of the ocean at night. "Liv, I can't." "You can," Olivia insisted, pressing the dress into her hands. "Sometimes we need a little magic to remember who we really are. And you, Naomi Bennett, are so much more than the girl who hides behind that reception desk." In the fitting room, Naomi slipped into the dress with trembling fingers. The woman who stared back at her in the mirror looked like someone from another world, regal, mysterious, beautiful. Her blonde braids, usually pulled back practically, now looked like a crown against the deep blue fabric. The dress hugged her curves without clinging, the color making her velvet skin glow. "Oh my God," Olivia breathed from the doorway. "You're going to break hearts on Saturday night." Naomi touched the mirror, half expecting the image to shatter. "I don't want to break anything," she whispered. "I just want to feel something real again." Later that night, in her apartment, Naomi sat cross-legged on her bed, staring at her careful budget notebook. The dress had cost 3 weeks of lunches, even with Olivia's discount, but for the first time in 2 years, she'd made an impulsive decision that had nothing to do with survival. The dress hung on her closet door like a promise. Next to it, she'd placed the invitation and the delicate mask Olivia had lent her, silver filigree that would frame her eyes without hiding them completely. As she got ready for bed, following her usual nighttime routine, Naomi caught herself humming. The sound startled her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd done that. In the bathroom mirror, she studied her reflection, really looked at herself beyond checking if her appearance was professional enough for work. "One night," she told her reflection, "one night to be someone else, someone brave." But as she lay in bed watching shadows play across her ceiling, Naomi wondered if maybe it wasn't about being someone else at all. Maybe it was about finally letting herself be who she'd always been, beneath the careful smile, beneath the practical shoes, beneath the armor of routine she'd built around her heart. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, she dreamed of dancing. In her dreams, she wore no mask at all. Saturday night descended on Charlotte like a whispered secret. From the back seat of Olivia's car, Naomi watched the city transform. Downtown's glass towers reflected the setting sun, their windows burning gold and crimson, while shadows gathered in the spaces between buildings like pooling ink. "Stop fidgeting with your mask," Olivia said from the driver's seat, catching Naomi's eye in the rearview mirror. "The adhesive will hold, I promise. And you look absolutely stunning." Naomi's fingers dropped from the silver filigree mask that curved around her eyes. The midnight blue dress whispered against her skin with every movement, and her blonde braids had been artfully arranged in an elegant updo, a few strands left loose to frame her face. She looked like someone else, someone who belonged at a secret millionaire's masquerade. "Maybe this was a mistake," she murmured, but Olivia was already pulling up to the valet station of the Addison Hotel, one of Charlotte's most exclusive venues. "No backing out now," Olivia declared, handing her keys to the valet. She looked ethereal in her own emerald green gown, a gold mask glinting against her pale skin. "Remember what I told you. The whole point of these parties is anonymity. No names, no business cards, no real-world connections. Just one night of pure fantasy." The hotel lobby was a blur of marble and crystal, but their destination lay deeper within. A discreet elevator, accessed only with special key cards, carried them to the 20th floor. When the doors opened, Naomi's breath caught in her throat. The ballroom had been transformed into something out of a dream. Hundreds of crystal chandeliers hung at different heights, their light diffused through gauzy fabric that draped from ceiling to floor like frozen waterfalls. The effect was otherworldly, as if they'd stepped into a space between reality and imagination. "Champagne," a waiter materialized beside them, offering delicate flutes of golden liquid. Naomi accepted one, grateful for something to do with her hands. Around them, other guests moved like exotic birds, women in spectacular gowns, men in immaculate tuxedos, everyone's faces partially obscured by masks that ranged from simple and elegant to elaborate works of art. "I need to find the powder room," Olivia announced, after they'd made one circuit of the room. "Will you be okay for a few minutes?" Naomi nodded, though her stomach tightened at the thought of being alone. She drifted toward one of the floor-to-ceiling windows, drawn to the glittering cityscape beyond. Charlotte spread out below like a carpet of stars, familiar yet strange from this height. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" The voice behind her was deep, rich like aged bourbon, though it makes you feel rather small. Naomi turned, and her world shifted on its axis. He was tall enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly even in her heels. His tuxedo fit him perfectly, highlighting broad shoulders and a powerful frame that spoke of regular workouts rather than vanity. A neatly trimmed beard framed lips that seemed caught between a smile and something more serious. Above his simple black mask, his eyes were startlingly blue, the kind of blue that made you think of winter skies and uncharted depths. "I like feeling small sometimes," she found herself saying, surprising herself with her honesty. "It's a reminder that our problems aren't as big as they seem." Something flickered in those blue eyes. Interest, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. Most people here are trying their best to feel important. Is that why you're hiding by the windows? His laugh was unexpected, warm and genuine, with a hint of surprise as if he didn't do it often. Caught me. I'm not particularly good at... He gestured at the glittering crowd. All this. Neither am I, Naomi admitted, turning back to the window. But maybe that's why masks were invented, to let us be something different, just for a little while. And what are you being tonight? The champagne must have been affecting her because she answered truthfully again. Brave. He stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Bravery implies fear. What are you afraid of? Everything. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Nothing. I don't know anymore. The orchestra, which had been playing soft background music, shifted into something slower, more intimate. The man beside her turned, offering his hand. Dance with me. Naomi hesitated for a fraction of a second before placing her hand in his. His fingers were warm, slightly calloused, not the soft hands she'd expected from someone at a millionaire's ball. He led her to the dance floor with the confidence of someone used to taking charge, but his touch remained gentle, almost reverent. When he drew her into his arms, it felt inevitable, like gravity, like tide pools filling with the rising ocean. One of his hands settled at her waist, the other clasping hers, and then they were moving together, as if they'd practiced for years. You're a beautiful dancer, he murmured, guiding her through a turn that made her dress swirl around her legs. My grandmother taught me, Naomi said, remembering Sunday afternoons in a small living room, counting steps to old records. She said everyone should know how to dance, even if they never go to balls. Wise woman. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, sending shivers down her spine. Though I doubt she imagined you'd end up here. She always told me magic finds you when you least expect it. Naomi looked up at him through her lashes, feeling bolder than she had in years. Is that what this is? Magic? His eyes darkened behind his mask. I stopped believing in magic a long time ago. Why? Reality has a way of destroying beautiful illusions. They danced in silence for a moment, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization. The chandeliers above cast shifting patterns across his face, making his expression unreadable behind the mask. Maybe, Naomi said finally, we need illusions sometimes, to remind us what's real. He pulled her slightly closer, his breath warming her temple. You're unlike anyone I've met at these events. Is that a good thing? I'm still deciding. The music shifted again, but they kept dancing, lost in their own private rhythm. Naomi couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so present in her own body, so aware of every sensation, the slide of silk against her skin, the strength of his hand at her waist, the way the air seemed to charge with electricity every time their eyes met. Tell me something true, he said suddenly, something you've never told anyone else. Naomi considered for a moment. I'm terrified of being invisible, of disappearing completely into the life I've built to feel safe. His hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her waist. And yet you wear a mask. The mask makes me visible, paradoxical, isn't it? Life usually is. He spun her out and pulled her back, closer than before. Your turn to ask me something. What are you hiding from? The question seemed to startle him. Their dancing slowed, becoming little more than a gentle sway. What makes you think I'm hiding? Everyone here is hiding something, but you're hiding from something specific. I can feel it. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. Myself, maybe. The person I've become. The person I used to be. Take your pick. Naomi raised her free hand, letting it rest against his chest. Through the fine fabric of his shirt she could feel his heart beating. Strong, steady, human. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for asking. His eyes searched hers, looking for something she couldn't name. Then slowly, deliberately, he bent down until their foreheads almost touched. Would it be terribly forward of me to kiss you? Naomi's breath caught. Yes, she whispered. Do it anyway. The first brush of his lips against hers was gentle, questioning, testing. But when she pressed closer, one hand sliding up to cup the back of his neck, the kiss deepened into something else entirely. He tasted like champagne and possibility, like all the dreams she'd been too afraid to chase. When they finally broke apart, the world had narrowed to just this, his arms around her, their shared breath, the way his eyes had turned the color of storm clouds. I should go, she whispered, though everything in her screamed to stay. Don't! His voice was rough. Stay. Tell me your name. But Naomi was already stepping back, her grandmother's words echoing in her head. The best magic ends before it has a chance to become ordinary. "Thank you for the dance," she said softly, touching his cheek once before turning away. She didn't look back as she walked off the dance floor, didn't stop when she heard him call after her. She found Olivia near the entrance, grabbed her hand, and pulled her toward the elevator. It wasn't until they were in the car, driving through the quiet streets of Charlotte, that Naomi realized she was trembling. "Are you okay?" Olivia asked, concerned. "Did something happen?" Naomi touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. "I think," she said slowly, "I just remembered what it feels like to be alive." Above them, the moon hung full and bright, turning the world silver, like masks, like promises, like the beginning of something both wonderful and terrible. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a thunderclap. Naomi stood in the lobby of Bright Smiles Dental, staring at the memo posted on the reception desk's glass partition. The words seemed to blur and reform before her eyes. "Notice of ownership change, effective immediately. Bright Smiles Dental and all affiliated clinics have been acquired by Velez Architecture and Development Group. All staff meetings mandatory today at 9 a.m. "Did you hear?" Lindsay, one of the dental assistants, appeared beside her, practically vibrating with excitement. "They're moving us to the new medical complex downtown. The one with the glass dome. Everyone's keeping their jobs, but we're getting upgraded to luxury status." Naomi nodded mechanically, her fingers clutching her coffee cup too tightly. The weekend felt like a dream now. The mask, the dance, the kiss that had haunted her every waking moment since Saturday night. She'd spent Sunday alternating between replaying every second in her mind and telling herself to forget it all. At precisely 8:55 a.m., the staff gathered in the break room. Dr. Rodriguez stood at the front, looking both nervous and excited. Beside him was a tall woman in a sharp charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back severely. "Good morning, everyone. This is Ms. Diane Walsh, Chief Operations Officer for Velez Architecture and Development Group." Ms. Walsh stepped forward, her heels clicking against the linoleum. "Thank you, Doctor. As you've all learned, Bright Smiles Dental is now part of the Velez Group's expanding medical division. We've been impressed with your practice's reputation for excellence, which is why you were chosen for our flagship location." She continued talking about transitions and opportunities, but Naomi's attention was caught by movement in the hallway. Through the break room's window, she saw a group of men in expensive suits walking toward the main entrance. "And now, Ms. Walsh's voice cut through Naomi's distraction. "I'd like to introduce you to our CEO, who has taken a personal interest in this acquisition." The break room door opened. Naomi's world stopped spinning. He walked in with the confidence of someone who owned not just the building, but the air inside it. The same broad shoulders she'd felt under her hands while dancing were now encased in a perfectly tailored grey suit. The same strong jaw she'd traced with her fingers bore the same neat beard. But without the mask, she could see every plane and angle of his face, handsome in a way that almost hurt to look at. "Good morning," he said, and Naomi felt her knees go weak. That voice, bourbon and thunder and secrets whispered in the dark. "I'm Mason Velez. Thank you all for being here today." His blue eyes swept the room, professional and distant. They passed over Naomi without a flicker of recognition, without the smallest hint that 2 nights ago, those same eyes had looked at her like she was magic. He didn't recognize her. The realization hit like a physical blow. Of course he didn't. She'd been wearing a mask. Her hair had been up. The lighting had been dim and romantic. Here, in fluorescent lighting, in her sensible work clothes, with her braids pulled back practically, she was invisible. Just another employee in a newly acquired business. Mason, Mr. Velez, continued speaking, his voice cool and controlled. "The transition will take approximately 6 weeks. During this time, we'll be gradually moving operations to the new location. Ms. Walsh will be your primary contact for any questions or concerns." Naomi forced herself to breathe normally, to keep her face neutral, but inside, she was crumbling. Every sweet word they'd exchanged, every charged moment, every emotion that had coursed through her when he'd kissed her, it had meant nothing to him. She was forgettable, just like before, just like always. The meeting continued, but Naomi heard it through a fog. She watched Mason's hands as he gestured, remembering how they'd felt on her waist. She studied his profile when he turned to reference the projected floor plans, remembering how he'd bent down to kiss her. "Miss Bennett?" "Ms." Walsh's sharp voice snapped her back to reality, As head receptionist, you'll be coordinating much of the logistical transition. Please stay after the meeting for additional instructions. Naomi managed a professional, "Yes, ma'am," while her heart thundered in her chest. Stay? With him in the room? But she had no choice. As the rest of the staff filed out, discussing the news in excited whispers, Naomi gathered her notebook and pen with trembling fingers. She approached Ms. Walsh's temporary desk, hyper-aware of Mason's presence by the window, his back to the room as he spoke quietly into his phone. "Miss Bennett, your role will be crucial in the coming weeks," Ms. Walsh began, pulling out a thick folder. "You'll be managing the patient database migration, coordinating appointment transfers, and helping establish our new booking protocols." "I understand," Naomi said, proud of how steady her voice remained. She could feel Mason behind her, could smell his cologne, the same scent that had clung to her dress after their dance. "Mr. Velez has specifically requested that you also assist with the interior design transition team," Ms. Walsh continued. "I understand you have some background in that area." Naomi froze. How could they possibly know about her interest in interior design? She'd never mentioned it at work, had only ever looked at courses online. "I noticed your eye for design in your workspace." Mason's voice came from behind her, professional and impersonal. "The way you've arranged the reception area shows an innate understanding of flow and comfort. We could use that perspective in the new space." Slowly, Naomi turned to face him. His expression was perfectly pleasant, perfectly distant. Not a hint of the man who'd asked her to tell him something true, who'd held her like she was precious, who'd kissed her like he never wanted to stop. "Thank you, Mr. Velez," she managed, "but I don't have any formal training. Sometimes natural talent is more valuable than formal education." Was there something in his voice, a slight roughness, or was she imagining it? "Unless you'd prefer not to take on the additional responsibility." Challenge flickered in his eyes, the first real emotion she'd seen from him all morning. Naomi straightened her spine, lifting her chin slightly. "I'm happy to help however I can, sir." "Excellent," Ms. Walsh cut in, seemingly oblivious to the tension crackling between them. "You'll be working directly with the design team 3 days a week. Your regular duties will be covered by a temporary receptionist on those days, with a corresponding increase in your compensation, of course." The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, during which Naomi learned about new software systems, security protocols, and scheduling requirements. She took careful notes, asked appropriate questions, and steadfastly ignored the way her skin prickled whenever Mason moved around the room. Finally, mercifully, it was over. Naomi gathered her things, ready to escape to the sanctuary of her desk. "Miss Bennett?" Mason's voice stopped her at the door. "A moment, please." Ms. Walsh had already left, taking her folders and tablets with her. Naomi turned slowly, her heart in her throat. Mason stood by the window again, his posture rigid. "I want you to understand something," he said, his voice low and controlled. "This opportunity is based solely on your professional capabilities, nothing else." The implied message was clear. If he did recognize her from the ball, it didn't matter. That night didn't exist in this reality. "Of course, Mr. Velez," Naomi replied, amazed at how calm she sounded when she was breaking inside. "Will that be all?" He studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes unreadable. "That will be all." Naomi walked back to her desk on legs that felt like water. She sat down, pulled up the patient database, and began her usual morning routine. But her computer screen blurred as tears threatened to fall. On her desk, the small potted succulent she kept, the only personal touch she allowed herself at work, seemed to mock her with its resilience. She touched one of its leaves gently. "Stupid," she whispered to herself. "So stupid to think." But she couldn't even finish the thought, because the truth was, she'd felt something real that night, something magical and rare and true. And now she had to sit here day after day, watching the man who'd made her feel that way treat her like she was nothing more than a line item in an acquisition deal. Her phone buzzed, a text from Olivia. "How's the morning going?" Naomi stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Remember that magic you said I needed? Turns out it was just an illusion after all." She put her phone away, straightened her shoulders, and began typing. She had work to do. She had a life to live. She had carefully constructed walls to rebuild, but in her mind, on an endless loop, she heard his voice from that night. Reality has a way of destroying beautiful illusions. She just hadn't expected it to destroy her in the process. 2 weeks into the renovation project, Naomi stood in the empty shell of what would become the new Bright Smiles flagship clinic. Morning light streamed through the massive glass dome above, casting intricate shadows across the bare concrete floors. She'd started coming in early, before the construction crews arrived, to think in the quiet. Her notebook was open on a makeshift table, pages filled with careful sketches and notes. Despite everything, she couldn't help losing herself in the work. Design came to her naturally, like breathing, like dancing. "You're here early." Naomi didn't need to turn to know it was Mason. His presence filled any room he entered, like a shift in atmospheric pressure. She'd learned to sense him coming, to armor herself before their interactions. "Good morning, Mr. Velez," she said, keeping her voice professionally neutral. "I wanted to review the lighting placement before the contractors arrive." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne but careful to maintain what he probably thought was appropriate professional distance. These past 2 weeks had been an exercise in careful distances. "Show me what you're thinking," he said, and something in his tone made her finally look at him. He'd clearly come straight from the gym, wearing running shoes and expensive workout clothes instead of his usual suits, his short hair slightly damp. The casual attire somehow made him more intimidating, more real, more like the man from the Masquerade. Naomi forced her attention back to her sketches. "The original plans called for standard recessed lighting throughout, but I think we're missing an opportunity. This space has incredible natural light during the day. We should complement that instead of competing with it." She flipped to another page, pointing to a detailed drawing. "See how the shadows move across the floor? We could install adjustable LED strips along these beams, programmed to shift with the natural light patterns. It would make the space feel organic, alive, less clinical." Mason leaned closer to study the drawings, his shoulder nearly touching hers. "You did these?" "Yes." Naomi fought the urge to step away. "I know they're not professional grade." "They're better than professional grade," he interrupted. "They show an understanding of how people actually experience space. Most designers think about how things look. You think about how they feel." The compliment hit her like a physical touch. "Thank you, Mr. Velez." "Mason." "Excuse me?" He straightened, running a hand through his hair in what seemed like frustration. "When we're discussing design concepts, call me Mason. All this Mr. Velez formality gets in the way of creative dialogue." Naomi's heart stuttered. "I don't think... It's not a request, Miss Bennett. It's about project efficiency." The hint of command in his voice made her spine stiffen. "Then you should call me Naomi," she said, matching his tone. "For efficiency's sake." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement. Approval. But his voice remained coolly professional. "Fine, Naomi. Tell me more about your lighting concept." For the next hour, they walked through the space together, discussing sightlines and traffic flow, debating materials and color palettes. Despite her best efforts to maintain emotional distance, Naomi found herself getting caught up in the exchange of ideas. Mason was surprisingly knowledgeable about design principles, challenging her assumptions and pushing her to defend her choices. "The reception area is crucial," he said, standing in what would become the main entrance. "It sets the tone for the entire patient experience." Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, visualizing. "Curved lines," she said softly. "Everything in dentistry is sharp and straight. Tools, chairs, mirrors. We need to balance that with organic shapes. Make people feel held, not cornered." When she opened her eyes, Mason was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, he looked exactly like he had at the ball, like he was seeing straight through to her soul. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He checked the message, his expression closing off. "The contractors will be here in 10 minutes. We should wrap this up." "Of course." Naomi began gathering her sketches, but his hand on her wrist stopped her. "Leave them," he said. "I want to show these to the design team." His fingers were warm against her skin, and for a heartbeat neither of them moved. Then Naomi gently pulled away. "As you wish, Mr. Vey." "Mason." She headed for the exit, but his voice stopped her. "Why didn't you ever pursue design professionally?" The question caught her off guard. She turned back slowly, finding him still standing by her makeshift workspace, looking somehow vulnerable in his casual clothes. "Life got in the way," she said finally. "Sometimes we have to choose between what we want and what we need. And which is this?" He gestured at the space around them. "Want or need? I don't know anymore." The honesty surprised them both. Before he could respond, voices echoed from the corridor, the construction crew arriving for the day. Naomi seized the escape opportunity. "I should get to the clinic. The temporary reception system still has some bugs to work out." She fled before he could stop her, taking the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. In the stairwell, she pressed her forehead against the cool concrete wall, trying to steady her breathing. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to feel this pull toward him, this dangerous attraction that went beyond physical desire. She wasn't supposed to see glimpses of the man from the ball in her stern, distant boss. She wasn't supposed to want more. Her phone chimed. A message from Ms. Walsh. Mr. Velez requests your participation in this afternoon's design team meeting. 2 p.m. Main conference room. Naomi stared at the message until the words blurred. Another 3 hours in his presence. Another 3 hours of pretending she didn't remember how his lips felt against hers, how his hands had held her like she was precious, how his voice had softened when she'd told him her fears. Professional distance, she whispered to herself. Just maintain professional distance. But as she walked to the clinic, her wrist still tingling from his touch, she wondered if there was enough distance in the world to make her forget what it felt like to dance with him in the dark. At her desk, she found a new addition, a sleek leather portfolio filled with professional-grade design materials. The note attached simply read, "For your sketches, M." Naomi traced the elegant embossing on the cover, her throat tight. It was exactly what she would have chosen for herself if she'd ever allowed herself such an indulgence. How had he known? She should return it. It was too personal, too thoughtful, too much like something a friend would give, or a lover. Instead, she carefully transferred her drawings into the portfolio, smoothing each page with trembling fingers. And if a tear fell on the pristine leather, well, that was between her and the morning shadows that still danced across her desk, reminiscent of another dance, in another place, with another version of the man who now held her professional future in his hands. The design team meeting had run late, and now darkness was falling over Charlotte. Naomi stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room, watching lights flicker on across the city skyline. Behind her, she could hear Mason discussing final details with the lead architect, their voices a low murmur in the emptying space. Her new portfolio lay open on the conference table, her designs now the centerpiece of the renovation project. Throughout the meeting, she'd watched her simple sketches transform into professional renderings, her vision taking shape in ways she'd never dared to dream possible. "Miss Bennett?" Ms. Walsh's crisp voice cut through her thoughts. "A word before you leave?" Naomi turned, finding the COO's expression unusually serious. Behind her, Mason had gone still, his conversation with the architect suddenly halted. "Of course," Naomi replied, gathering her things. "Actually," Ms. Walsh glanced at Mason, some unspoken communication passing between them, "let's use Mr. Velez's office. He has another engagement." Mason's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he nodded. "Take all the time you need." He left without looking at Naomi, his steps just a fraction too quick to be casual. Ms. Walsh led the way to Mason's corner office, a stunning space with wraparound windows and minimalist decor. She gestured for Naomi to sit in one of the sleek leather chairs facing the desk. "Your work today was impressive," Ms. Walsh began, remaining standing. "Very impressive, which is why I need to ask you something directly. Have you ever met Mr. Velez before the acquisition?" Naomi's heart stopped. I said, "Why do you ask?" "Because I've worked with Mason Velez for 7 years, and I've never seen him champion an employee's ideas the way he championed yours today." Ms. Walsh's dark eyes were sharp, assessing. "He doesn't typically take such personal interest in project details." "We've never met before," Naomi said carefully. Technically, it wasn't a lie. She'd never met Mason Velez before. She'd met a stranger in a mask who'd made her feel alive. Ms. Walsh didn't look entirely convinced. "Well, regardless, I should warn you about something. Mr. Velez has been through a lot. His wife's death hit him hard." Naomi's fingers tightened on her portfolio. "I don't understand what this has to do with—" "He's not the same man he was 5 years ago," Ms. Walsh continued as if Naomi hadn't spoken. "He's brilliant at business, but personally," she sighed, "let's just say he doesn't handle emotional complications well anymore." "Ms. Walsh," Naomi stood, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I appreciate your concern, but I assure you my relationship with Mr. Velez is purely professional. See that it stays that way." The words were sharp, almost protective. "For both your sakes." After Ms. Walsh left, Naomi remained in Mason's office, trying to process what had just happened. The space felt heavy with his absence, everything arranged with precise intention, not a single personal item in sight. Like a stage set rather than a real room. A movement caught her eye, a cleaning cart passing in the hallway. The cleaning crew had started their evening rounds, which meant it was later than she'd realized. She should go, But as she reached the door, something made her turn back. In the fading daylight, something glinted on a high shelf behind Mason's desk. Without letting herself think too hard about what she was doing, Naomi walked around the desk for a closer look. Her breath caught. There, partially hidden behind some architecture awards, was a mask. Not just any mask, the simple black mask from the ball. And tucked behind it, barely visible, was a folded piece of paper. Before she could stop herself, Naomi reached for it. Her fingers had just brushed the paper when, "What are you doing?" Mason's voice, hard as steel, froze her in place. She turned slowly, finding him in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, stepping away from the desk. "I was just leaving after my meeting with Ms. Walsh, and I thought I saw... You thought you'd snoop through my personal belongings." His voice was controlled, but fury radiated from every line of his body. "Is that standard procedure for receptionists these days?" The deliberate emphasis on her position stung. "No, Get out. Mason, please. Mr. Velez," he corrected coldly, "and I said get out." Naomi grabbed her things and fled, tears burning in her eyes. She made it to the elevator before the first sob escaped, muffling the sound with her hand. The portfolio he'd given her felt like it was burning against her chest. She was so upset she almost missed it, the sound of something being thrown against a wall, followed by what might have been a cry of frustration, echoing down the empty hallway from Mason's office. The elevator doors closed, taking her away from the evidence of his anger, his pain, and whatever secret that folded paper might have revealed. The next morning, Naomi arrived early as usual, but something was different. The construction crew was already there, and Ms. Walsh was waiting at her desk. "There's been a change of plans," the COO announced without preamble. "You'll be working with the secondary design team from now on. They'll be based at the downtown office." Naomi's stomach dropped. "I don't understand. Yesterday..." "Mr. Velez feels your talents would be better utilized in a different capacity." Ms. Walsh's tone left no room for discussion. "The temporary receptionist will take over your regular duties effective immediately. Report to the downtown office at 9. As if summoned by his name, Mason appeared from the stairwell. He walked past without acknowledging either of them, his face set in lines of granite. But just before he turned the corner, Naomi saw something that made her heart stop. His hand was bandaged, as if he'd punched a wall. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He wasn't angry at her. Not really. He was angry at himself. But why? The answer came in a flash of memory. Reality has a way of destroying beautiful illusions. He did recognize her. He had all along. And for some reason, that recognition terrified him more than anything else. Naomi spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through the motions with the downtown design team. They were professional, competent, and completely uninterested in her ideas about organic flow and emotional resonance. Everything was numbers and efficiency and cost analysis. That evening she sat in her apartment, staring at the portfolio he'd given her. Inside, her drawings looked small and naive compared to the technical renderings the downtown team had shown her, but they were real. They were hers. They represented something true. Her phone buzzed. Olivia calling to check on her. Naomi let it go to voicemail. How could she explain what had happened? How could she describe the look in Mason's eyes when he'd found her in his office? Not just anger, but fear. Outside her window, a storm was rolling in, lightning flickering between buildings like nature's own masquerade. Naomi pressed her forehead against the cool glass, remembering another night, another storm in his eyes before he'd kissed her. "What are you hiding from?" she'd asked him then. Now, watching the storm approach, she whispered the answer to herself. Everything. Nothing. Love itself. Because that's what this was really about, wasn't it? Not just the masks they wore or the roles they played, but the terrifying possibility of being seen, really seen, by another person. The first drops of rain hit her window, and Naomi made a decision. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to the number listed in her employee contact sheet. "The mask suited you better than this wall you're building. At least it was honest about hiding something." She hit send before she could lose her nerve, then turned off her phone completely. Tomorrow would bring consequences, she was sure, but for tonight, she'd said something true, and sometimes that had to be enough. When Naomi finally turned her phone back on the next morning, there was only one message. "My office, 7 a.m. The sun was barely rising as she stepped out of the elevator into the executive floor. The space felt different in the early morning light, less imposing, more vulnerable somehow, like a theater before the show begins. Mason was standing at his window, his back to the door. He'd lost the suit jacket, and his white shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing the bandage on his right hand. He didn't turn when she entered. "Close the door," Naomi did, her heart thundering in her chest. The mask was no longer visible on the shelf, but its absence felt like a presence in itself. "That text," he said finally, still facing the window, "was inappropriate. So is pretending you don't recognize me." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and undeniable. Mason's shoulders tensed, and for a moment Naomi thought he might dismiss her again. Instead, he turned slowly to face her. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept at all. The careful control he usually maintained was fraying at the edges, revealing something raw underneath. "Sit down, Naomi." She did, perching on the edge of one of the leather chairs. Mason remained standing, running his unbandaged hand through his hair in a gesture she was beginning to recognize as frustration. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally. "The truth." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The truth is that I'm your employer. The truth is that anything else, any other interaction between us, would be professionally and ethically questionable." "That's not the truth," Naomi said quietly. "That's another mask." Mason moved suddenly, crossing the space between them in 2 long strides. He planted his hands on the arms of her chair, caging her in, his face inches from hers. His eyes were wild, desperate. "You want the truth?" His voice was rough. "The truth is that I haven't slept properly since that night. The truth is that when I walk into a room, I look for you first. The truth is that every time you show me one of your designs, I see not just what you created, but who you are. This brilliant, gentle, fierce woman who sees the world in ways that make me remember what it's like to feel something real." Naomi's breath caught. "Then why?" "Because I can't." He pushed away from the chair, pacing like a caged animal. "I can't feel these things. I can't want these things. I can't." He stopped abruptly, pressing his bandaged hand against the window as if trying to ground himself. "Can't what?" Naomi stood, taking a step toward him. "Can't let yourself be happy? You don't understand. Then help me understand." Mason was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Clara, my wife. She was an interior designer too." He kept his back to Naomi, but she could see his reflection in the window, the pain etched across his face. She had that same light in her eyes when she talked about spaces, about making people feel things through design. She used to say that architecture wasn't about buildings, it was about the moments that happen inside them. Naomi's heart ached. What happened to her? Brain aneurysm. 5 years ago. One minute we were having breakfast talking about renovating our house, and the next, his voice cracked, the next minute my whole world collapsed. "I'm so sorry, Mason." "The worst part?" He turned to face her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "When I saw you at the ball, when we danced, when we talked, for the first time in 5 years, I felt something other than numb, and it terrified me." "Why?" "Because I don't deserve it." The words exploded out of him. "I couldn't save her. I couldn't do anything. I just sat there holding her hand, watching her slip away. And now every time I look at you, every time I see that same passion, that same light," he pressed his bandaged hand to his chest, "it feels like betraying her memory." Naomi moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "Do you think she'd want you to punish yourself forever? You don't know what she'd want. You didn't know her." "No," Naomi agreed softly. "But I know what it's like to be afraid of living, to build walls so high that even you can't see over them anymore." She was close enough now to touch him, but she didn't. Instead, she pulled something from her bag, the portfolio he'd given her. "When you gave me this," she said, "it was the first time anyone had ever validated my dream, not with words, but with action. You saw something in me that I barely let myself see. That's not betrayal, Mason. That's being alive." His eyes fixed on the portfolio, then lifted to her face. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to feel these things again." "Neither do I." Naomi smiled sadly. "My last relationship. He didn't hit me, but he made me feel so small, so worthless, that I forgot who I was. It's taken me 2 years to even start remembering." Mason's hand twitched toward her, then dropped. "Is that why you left the ball? Why you didn't tell me your name?" "I left because for one perfect night I got to be exactly who I am. No history, no baggage, no fear, just me. And I was afraid that in the light of day, that magic would disappear. And has it?" Naomi looked at him, really looked at him, at the pain and fear in his eyes, but also at the possibility, the want, the life, struggling to break through the walls he'd built. "No," she said softly. It's still there. In every design I draw, in every moment you forget to pretend you don't see me, in every time you let yourself feel something real. Mason closed his eyes, swaying slightly toward her. Naomi. His phone buzzed sharply, making them both jump. The spell broke. Reality rushed back in. The board meeting, he muttered, checking the message. I have to. I know. Naomi stepped back, clutching the portfolio to her chest like a shield. We both have jobs to do. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. The downtown team, he said. I wasn't punishing you. I was trying to protect myself. Naomi looked back at him, this beautiful, broken man trying so hard to keep his world from changing. I know that too, she said gently. But Mason, sometimes the things we think will break us are actually the things that help us heal. She left him standing there, silhouetted against the rising sun. In the elevator, she finally let herself feel everything. The pain, the hope, the terrifying possibility of what might happen next. Her phone buzzed. Another message from him. The design meeting tomorrow. Main conference room. 9 a.m. Come back to the primary team, please. Naomi pressed her fingers to her lips, tasting salt. Sometimes healing started with the smallest steps. Sometimes love began with simply being brave enough to try. She typed back one word. Yes. The next 2 weeks passed in a delicate dance of unspoken rules and careful distances. During design meetings, Mason and Naomi maintained professional composure, but something had shifted. Everyone could feel it, the electric current that ran between them whenever their eyes met, the way the air seemed to change when they occupied the same space. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when everything began to unravel. Naomi stood in the nearly completed reception area of the new clinic, running her hand along the curved wall she'd designed. The construction crew had executed her vision perfectly, organic shapes flowing into each other, creating a space that felt both modern and nurturing. It's beautiful. She turned to find Mason in the doorway, his suit jacket dark with rain. He looked tired, but somehow lighter than he had in weeks, as if their conversation in his office had loosened something inside him. Thank you, she said softly, for trusting my vision. He moved closer, his shoes leaving wet prints on the new flooring. I trust more than your vision. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Naomi's heart raced as he stopped beside her, close enough that she could smell rain and coffee on him. Mason, I know, he cut her off gently. I know all the reasons why this is complicated, but I can't stop thinking about something you said. What? That sometimes the things we think will break us are actually the things that help us heal. He turned to face her fully. I've been seeing a therapist since our talk. The admission clearly cost him something to make. Naomi resisted the urge to reach for him. That's good. She says I've been using Clara's memory as an excuse to stop living. His voice was rough. That I've been hiding behind my grief instead of honoring who she was, someone who loved life, who believed in second chances. Thunder rumbled outside, and the rain intensified, drumming against the glass dome above them. The sound created a cocoon of privacy around them, making the vast space feel intimate. Yesterday was our wedding anniversary, Mason continued. For the first time in 5 years, I went to her grave and talked to her, really talked to her, about you, about everything. Naomi's breath caught. What did you say? I told her I was scared, terrified actually, not just of feeling something again, but of feeling something this strong. His blue eyes met hers, intense and vulnerable. Because what I feel when I'm with you, it's not just attraction or connection, it's like waking up, like coming back to life. Mason, we can't... I know. He ran a hand through his damp hair. Trust me, I know every professional and ethical reason why this is impossible. But I also know that watching you work, seeing how you pour your heart into every detail, how you fight to make your dreams real despite everything, it makes me want to be brave again. Before Naomi could respond, voices echoed from the corridor, the afternoon inspection team arriving. They jumped apart like guilty teenagers, and Mason quickly adopted his professional mask. Excellent work on the reception area, Miss Bennett, he said loudly, as Ms. Walsh and 2 inspectors entered. The execution meets all specifications. Naomi played along, nodding professionally. Thank you, Mr. Velez. Shall we show the team the treatment rooms? The rest of the afternoon was a blur of technical discussions and final approvals, but Naomi couldn't focus. Her mind kept returning to Mason's words, to the raw honesty in his voice when he talked about waking up. Later, as she packed up her things to leave, she found a note slipped into her portfolio. Dinner tonight, not as your boss, not as the man from the ball, just as myself, if you're willing. M. Below was an address, Not a restaurant, but what appeared to be a residential location. Naomi stared at the note until the letters blurred. This was the moment, she realized. The point where she had to decide if she was brave enough to step off the careful path she'd built for herself. Her phone buzzed. Olivia calling. This time she answered. "I need advice," she said without preamble. "Finally," Olivia exclaimed. "I've been waiting for you to talk about whatever's been going on. You've been different lately. More alive." Naomi closed her eyes. What if the thing that makes you feel alive is also the thing that could destroy everything you've worked for? "Oh, honey," Olivia's voice softened. "The things worth having usually come with risks. The question is, which would you regret more? Taking the chance or always wondering what might have happened if you had?" After hanging up, Naomi sat at her desk for a long time, watching the rain paint patterns on the windows. She thought about the man she'd danced with at the ball, how free she'd felt in his arms. She thought about Mason in his office, raw with grief and fear, but still reaching out. She thought about herself 2 years ago, putting herself back together piece by piece after someone had tried to convince her she was nothing. Finally, she pulled out her phone and typed, "What time?" His response came immediately. 7:30. "I'll cook." Naomi gathered her things with trembling hands. She had just enough time to go home and change. But as she reached the elevator, Ms. Walsh stepped out, her expression grave. "Miss Bennet." "A word?" Naomi's stomach dropped. "Of course, Ms." Walsh led her to a small conference room and closed the door. "The board is concerned about the attention Mr. Velez has been showing your work." "I don't understand." "Several board members have suggested that your rapid advancement might appear inappropriate." Ms. Walsh's voice was carefully neutral. "They're considering transferring you to our Seattle office, with a significant promotion, of course." The words hit Naomi like physical blows. Seattle, thousands of miles away. A golden cage disguised as an opportunity. "This isn't about my work at all, is it?" she asked quietly. Ms. Walsh sighed. "Mason Velez is more than our CEO. He's the face of this company, the driving force behind our success. His personal life, his decisions, they affect stockholder confidence, client relationships, everything. And me? What about my decisions? You're talented, Naomi. Genuinely talented. Don't throw away a real opportunity for something that can't last." Naomi stood, her legs surprisingly steady. "Thank you for your concern, Ms. Walsh. I'll need time to consider the offer." "Don't take too long. The board meets on Monday." Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Naomi sat in her car, staring at Mason's address on her phone. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built, it all hung in the balance. Her finger hovered over the message thread. She could cancel, step back, take the safe path to Seattle, and a future that looked good on paper. Instead, she started her car, because sometimes the biggest risks weren't about what you might lose, but about what you'd never find if you didn't try. As she drove through the darkening city, Naomi thought about masks, the ones we wear to protect ourselves, the ones others try to force upon us, and the terrifying courage it takes to finally let them fall. The note in her portfolio seemed to burn against her heart. Not as your boss, not as the man from the ball, just as myself. Maybe, she thought, it was time for both of them to stop hiding. Mason's house wasn't what Naomi expected. Instead of the sleek downtown penthouse she'd imagined, she found herself driving into a quiet neighborhood of historic homes, where massive oak trees lined the streets. His place was a restored Victorian, all dark wood and leaded glass windows glowing warmly against the twilight sky. She sat in her car for a long moment, watching shadows move behind the front windows. Somewhere inside, Mason was waiting. Not her boss, not the mysterious man from the ball, just himself, whoever that turned out to be. Before she could lose her nerve, Naomi grabbed the bottle of wine she'd brought and walked up the path. The porch steps creaked under her feet, and she noticed small imperfections in the paint, traces of ongoing restoration work. This wasn't a showpiece home. It was a work in progress. Her knock echoed in the evening quiet. Footsteps approached, and then the door opened. Mason stood there in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, looking somehow younger without his usual corporate armor. His feet were bare on the hardwood floors, and something about that detail made Naomi's heart flutter. "You came," he said softly, as if he hadn't quite believed she would. "I came." She held out the wine bottle like a shield. "I hope Red is okay." He took the bottle, his fingers brushing hers. "Perfect. Come in." The interior was a surprise, warm and lived in, with a mixture of modern furniture and restored antiques. Books were everywhere, stacked on coffee tables and filling built-in shelves. The air smelled of garlic and herbs, and something else that made her stomach growl. "Homemade pasta," Mason explained, leading her through to the kitchen. "My grandmother's recipe. It's one of the few things I can cook well." The kitchen was huge and clearly renovated, but not in the stark professional style she'd expected. Instead, it felt like a home kitchen. Copper pots hanging from a rack, fresh herbs growing in window boxes, a well-used wooden cutting board on the island. "You cook often?" Naomi asked, accepting the glass of wine he poured her. "More lately." He moved to check something simmering on the stove. "My therapist suggested finding ways to connect with happy memories instead of just avoiding everything that hurts. And cooking is a happy memory. Sundays at my grandmother's house, all the cousins helping in the kitchen, flour everywhere, my grandfather sneaking tastes when he thought no one was looking." His voice was warm with remembrance. Clara loved those Sundays. She said it was where she learned that design wasn't just about how things looked, but about how they brought people together. He said Clara's name without flinching, Naomi noticed. Small steps forward. "Will you tell me about her?" she asked gently. Mason looked up from the pot he was stirring, surprise flickering across his face. "You want to know about her? She's part of who you are, and I want to know who you are. All of you." He was quiet for a moment, adding fresh basil to the sauce. She was radiant, not just beautiful, but alive in a way that made everyone around her feel more alive too. She could walk into a room and immediately see how to make it better, not just aesthetically, but emotionally. She used to say that every space tells a story. The question is whether it's the story people need to hear. "That's beautiful. She would have liked you," he said quietly. "Your design, they have that same understanding, that same heart." Before Naomi could respond, a timer dinged. They fell into an easy rhythm, Mason draining the pasta while she found plates in the cabinet he pointed to, both of them moving around each other in the warm kitchen space, as if they'd done this 100 times before. Over dinner at the kitchen island, the dining room still being renovated, he'd explained, they talked, really talked, about their families, their dreams, the paths that had led them here. Mason told her about growing up with a father who valued success over happiness, about building his company from scratch, about meeting Clara at a charity auction where they'd argued about the venue's terrible design. Naomi shared stories about her grandmother teaching her to dance, about the first room she'd ever decorated, her teenage bedroom, painted 3 different times before she got it right. She told him about her ex, about slowly losing herself in his criticism until she barely recognized her own reflection. "I'll never let anyone make me feel that small again," she said firmly, twirling pasta on her fork. "Good." Mason's voice was fierce. "You're extraordinary, Naomi. The way you see the world, the way you fight for your vision, while still being so gentle with everyone around you, it takes my breath away." Heat crept up her neck. "Mason, I know." He set down his fork. "I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is complicated. The board, they want to send me to Seattle." Naomi cut in. "Ms. Walsh told me today." Mason went very still. "What?" "A promotion, a transfer, a way to remove the complication. I'll stop them." His jaw clenched. No." Naomi reached across the island, touching his hand. "That would only prove their point. Make it look like exactly what they fear it is. And what do they fear it is? A scandal, a liability, a CEO losing his objectivity over an employee." Mason turned his hand under hers, linking their fingers. "Is that what this is? You tell me." He stood, still holding her hand, and walked around the island until he was standing in front of her. In the warm kitchen light, his eyes were the color of the ocean before a storm. "What I feel for you," he said slowly, "has nothing to do with your being an employee. It terrifies me exactly because it's real. Because you make me want things I thought I'd never want again. Because every time you walk into a room, my whole world shifts just a little, like it's realigning itself around your presence." Naomi's heart thundered in her chest. "Mason, let me finish." His free hand came up to cup her cheek. "I know the professional complications. I know the risks. But sitting here with you, talking about everything and nothing, watching you twirl pasta and laugh at my terrible jokes, this feels more real than anything has in 5 years. The board meets Monday," she whispered. "Then we have decisions to make." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "But right now, in this moment, I don't want to be CEO Mason Velez. I don't want to think about boards or transfers or complications. I just want to be the man who can't take his eyes off you. "And who is that man?" Instead of answering, he kissed her, not like at the ball, where passion had burned hot and fast. This kiss was slower, deeper, full of questions and answers and possibilities. His hands framed her face like she was precious, like she was something he'd been searching for without knowing it. When they finally broke apart, Naomi realized she was crying. Mason brushed the tears away with gentle fingers. "Why the tears?" "Because I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, or of us, but of losing everything I've worked for, of having to choose between my dreams and whatever this is becoming. I would never ask you to give up your dreams." His voice was fierce. "You're too talented, too special. The world needs your vision, Naomi." "Then what do we do?" Mason pressed his forehead to hers. "We find a way, together. No masks, no hiding. Just us, being brave enough to choose what's real." Outside, a car door slammed, breaking the moment. They stepped apart, both suddenly aware of how the world waited beyond these walls, with all its judgments and consequences. "Stay," Mason said softly. "Not for that. Just stay and talk. Help me remember what it feels like to share a space with someone who sees me, really sees me." Naomi looked at him, this powerful man made vulnerable by want, this grieving soul learning to live again, this person who somehow felt like home despite every reason why he shouldn't. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Because sometimes, she was learning, the bravest thing you can do is simply choose to be present in a moment, letting it be whatever it needs to be, even when you know mourning will bring complications and consequences and choices that can't be undone. They spent the rest of the evening on his back porch, watching fireflies dance in the garden while the moon rose over the oak trees. They talked about everything and nothing, their hands linked loosely between them, both aware that this quiet peace was temporary, but choosing to savor it anyway. Tomorrow would come with its demands. Monday loomed with its corporate threats. The world waited to judge them, but for now there was just this. Two people finding their way back to life, one shared moment at a time. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Naomi sat in her car in the corporate parking garage, watching early sunlight paint golden stripes across her steering wheel. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Mason. "Whatever happens in there, remember Thursday night. Remember what's real." They hadn't seen each other since that evening at his house, not because they didn't want to, but because they both knew what was coming. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and Naomi had been invited to attend. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like ascending to judgment. Ms. Walsh was waiting by the conference room, her expression carefully neutral. "Miss Bennett." She gestured to a chair near the door. "Please wait here. The board will call you in when they're ready." Through the glass walls, Naomi could see board members filing in, men and women in expensive suits, carrying tablets and coffee cups, wearing expressions of mild concern or carefully masked interest. Mason sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of professional detachment, but she saw his hands, the way his fingers gripped his pen too tightly, the slight tremor when he reached for his water glass. At exactly 10 a.m., Ms. Walsh opened the door. "They're ready for you." Naomi stood, smoothing her dress, the midnight blue one from the Masquerade ball. She'd chosen it deliberately, armor and reminder all in one. The boardroom fell silent as she entered. 12 pairs of eyes turned to study her, assess her, judge her. Mason's gaze remained fixed on his papers. "Miss Bennett," the board chairman, Mr. Richardson, smiled thinly. "Thank you for joining us. We understand you've been offered a position at our Seattle office." "Yes, sir." "And have you made a decision about this opportunity?" Naomi took a deep breath. "I have, sir. I'm declining the transfer." A murmur rippled through the room. Mason's head snapped up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. "I see." Mr. Richardson's smile disappeared. "That's unfortunate." Ms. Walsh explained the circumstances. "If by circumstances you mean the board's concern about my professional relationship with Mr. Velez, then yes." Naomi's voice was steady. She explained everything. "Then you understand our position. Your rapid advancement, the personal attention to your designs, the unusual nature of your interactions." "What's unusual," Naomi interrupted, "is punishing someone for being good at their job." The room went very still. Even Mason looked shocked at her boldness. "I beg your pardon?" Mr. Richardson's voice had turned to ice. "My designs are being implemented because they work, because they understand how people interact with spaces, because they're bringing in client praise and positive press." Naomi pulled out her portfolio, the one Mason had given her, and placed it on the table. Everything in here was earned through talent and hard work, not through whatever you're implying. Miss Bennett, another board member cut in, no one is questioning your talent, but the appearance of impropriety. Is that what this is about? Mason's voice cracked through the room like thunder. Appearances. Mason, Mr. Richardson warned, you agreed to remain neutral in this discussion. No. Mason stood slowly, his hands flat on the table. I agreed to let you handle this professionally, but there's nothing professional about forcing out a valuable employee because you're afraid of gossip. This isn't about gossip, Ms. Walsh interjected. This is about protecting the company's reputation. Your reputation. My reputation? Mason laughed harshly. My reputation as what? The grieving widower? The cold CEO, the man who stopped living 5 years ago? Mason, please, one of the older board members said softly. We all understood when you needed time after Clara's death. But this involvement, it's too soon, too public, too soon. Mason's voice broke. It's been 5 years. 5 years of existing, but not living. 5 years of running this company on autopilot while my soul died a little more each day. And now when I finally find someone who makes me want to be alive again, you want to ship her to Seattle. Naomi's heart thundered in her chest. He was throwing everything away, his carefully maintained image, his professional distance, everything. Mr. Velez, she said quietly, don't. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his eyes shifted. No, Naomi, I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending. He turned back to the board. You want to know the truth? Here it is. I met Naomi at a masquerade ball. I didn't know she worked for me. We danced, we talked. We connected in a way I haven't connected with anyone since Clara died. The boardroom was absolutely silent. When I found out she was an employee, I tried to ignore it, to maintain professional distance, to be the cold, controlled CEO you all expect me to be. But here's what happened instead. I watched her work. I saw her talent, her vision, her incredible gift for understanding how spaces affect people. And yes, I championed her designs, not because I was attracted to her, but because they were brilliant. Mason, Mr. Richardson started, but Mason cut him off. I'm not finished. You all knew Clara. You knew how she lit up rooms, how she believed in the power of design to change lives. Naomi has that same gift, that same light. And instead of celebrating that talent, instead of recognizing what she could bring to this company, you want to bury her in Seattle because you're afraid of what people might think. It's not that simple, Ms. Walsh protested. Actually, it is. Mason straightened to his full height. Here's what's going to happen. Naomi stays in Charlotte. She takes over as head of interior design for all our medical facilities, reporting directly to the board, not to me, to avoid any conflict of interest. Her designs are already bringing in praise and new clients. You'd be fools to lose that asset. And what about personal complications? Mr. Richardson asked carefully. My personal life is my own. Mason's voice was steel. As long as it doesn't affect the company's performance or profitability, it's none of the board's concern. And if we disagree, one of the younger board members challenged. Mason smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then I'll resign, immediately, and take my controlling shares with me. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Naomi watched the board members exchange glances, calculating the cost of losing their CEO against the risk of scandal. That won't be necessary, she said quietly. Every head turned to her. Mason's face went pale. Naomi, no, I quit. The words fell like stones in water, rippling through the silent room. Miss Bennett, Ms. Walsh started, but Naomi held up her hand. Not because I'm afraid of scandal, not because I've done anything wrong, but because I won't be the reason this company loses its heart. She looked directly at Mason. You built something incredible here, something that helps people, that creates spaces where lives can heal and change. I won't let my presence destroy that. Naomi, please. I've already been offered a position with Riverside Development. The words hit Mason like physical blows. They've seen my work on the clinic. They want me to head their new healthcare division. No complications, no scandal, just my talent speaking for itself. She turned back to the board. So you see, there's no need for drama, no need for resignations or transfers. I'll finish the clinic project as a consultant, then step away cleanly. Everyone saves face. The relief on the board members' faces was palpable. Everyone except Mason, who looked like his world was crumbling all over again. If that's all? Naomi picked up her portfolio, her movements precise and controlled despite her trembling hands. Miss Bennett, Mr. Richardson said quickly, perhaps we should discuss... No, her voice was firm. We shouldn't. Good day, everyone. Mr. Velez. She nodded once in Mason's direction, not trusting herself to meet his eyes, and walked out of the boardroom with her head high. She made it to the elevator before the first tear fell. As the doors closed, she heard Mason's voice, desperate, breaking, calling her name. But she didn't turn around. Sometimes love meant knowing when to let go, even if it shattered your heart in the process. Sometimes being brave meant walking away, even when every step felt like dying. Sometimes the truest thing you could do was say goodbye to the dream, so the dreamer could survive. 3 months later, Naomi stood in the completed Bright Smiles flagship clinic, watching the first sunset paint the glass dome in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would be the grand opening, her last official day as a consultant, her final connection to everything that had happened here. The space had turned out exactly as she'd envisioned. Organic curves guided patients through the facility, while strategic lighting and natural elements created an atmosphere of calm and healing. It was the best work she'd ever done, and she hadn't seen Mason since the board meeting. Oh, she'd heard his voice in project meetings conducted via conference call, had seen his signature on approval documents, had felt his presence in the careful way everyone tiptoed around mentioning his name. But he'd honored her choice, staying away while she finished the project. Her phone buzzed, a text from her new boss at Riverside Development. Design Magazine wants to interview you about the clinic. Your call if you want to do it. Naomi smiled slightly. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of new opportunities. Riverside had given her free rein to build their healthcare division from scratch, and her innovative designs were already attracting attention in the industry. She was doing what she loved, making her own name, standing on her own talents. So why did success taste like ashes in her mouth? I thought I'd find you here. Naomi's heart stopped. Slowly, she turned. Mason stood in the doorway, backlit by the sunset. He looked different, his beard slightly longer, his suit replaced by jeans and a simple button-down shirt. But his eyes were the same ocean blue that had haunted her dreams for months. The opening's tomorrow, she said, proud of how steady her voice remained. I was just doing a final walkthrough. I know. He stepped into the space, looking around with genuine appreciation. It's extraordinary, Naomi. Even better than your original designs. Thank you. She gripped her portfolio, still the one he'd given her, like a shield. Was there something you needed, Mr. Velez? Don't. His voice cracked. Don't call me that. Not here. Not now. Why are you here, Mason? He moved closer, his steps echoing in the empty clinic. I resigned as CEO this morning. Naomi's portfolio slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud. What? Why? Because 3 months ago, the bravest person I've ever met walked out of my life to protect everything I'd built, and it took me this long to realize that none of it matters without her. Mason, you can't. I can. I did. He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of frustration that made her heart ache. The board appointed Richards as interim CEO. I'm keeping my shares, my seat on the board, but stepping back from daily operations to focus on special projects. What kind of special projects? A smile tugged at his lips. Well, there's this brilliant designer I know who's doing revolutionary work in healthcare spaces. I was thinking of partnering with her company, creating a foundation that helps renovate outdated medical facilities in underserved communities. Naomi's breath caught. Mason, I've spent 5 years hiding behind Clara's memory and another 3 months hiding behind professional obligations. I'm done hiding. He closed the distance between them, close enough to touch but holding himself back. I love you, Naomi Bennett. I love your gentle heart and your fierce spirit. I love how you see the beauty in broken things and know how to make them whole again. I love... She kissed him. It wasn't gentle or hesitant. It was 3 months of longing, of missing his voice and his laugh and the way he looked at her like she was magic. His arms wrapped around her immediately, pulling her close as if he'd been dying to hold her all this time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the sunset had painted them in shades of gold and shadow. I missed you, she whispered against his lips. Every day, every moment I missed you. I'm so sorry I let you walk away. His forehead pressed against hers. I should have followed you then. Should have told the board to go to hell. Should have... No! Naomi pulled back enough to see his face. I needed these 3 months. Needed to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own. That my talent was real, not just something you saw in me. Understanding dawned in his eyes. And have you proved it? My designs are being featured in 3 industry magazines. Riverside's given me my own division. I'm being asked to speak at conferences. She smiled. So yes, I'd say I've proved it. I never doubted you would. His hands framed her face. You're extraordinary, Naomi. You always have been. I hope I haven't lost my chance to be part of your story. She covered his hands with hers. You know what I think about stories? What? They're like spaces. Sometimes you have to tear down walls to let the light in. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to start over. And sometimes, she smiled, sometimes the most beautiful designs come from taking broken pieces and making something new. Mason's eyes shone with unshed tears. I love you. I love you too. The words felt like coming home. No masks, no hiding, no masks, he agreed. Just us, just real. Outside, the sun had set completely, but the glass dome above them reflected the city lights like stars. In the gentle glow, Naomi could see their reflection, two people who had found each other behind masks, but learned to love what lay beneath them. Dance with me? Mason asked softly. There's no music. He pulled her close anyway, swaying gently in the starlit space. We'll make our own. And so they danced, in the clinic she had designed, surrounded by the proof of her talent and his trust. They danced to the rhythm of second chances and hard-won truths. They danced as equals, not boss and employee, not CEO and designer, but simply two people brave enough to choose love over fear. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be gossip to face, boundaries to establish, details to work out. The foundation they dreamed of building would take time and effort. Their relationship would need care and nurturing. But tonight, in this space that represented both ending and beginning, they simply held each other and danced. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories aren't about perfect moments or fairy tale endings. Sometimes they're about the courage to be imperfectly, wonderfully real. Sometimes they're about two people who were broken in different ways, finding that their jagged edges fit together perfectly. And sometimes, just sometimes, they're about what happens after the masks come off, when we're brave enough to let ourselves be seen, be known, be loved, not for who we pretend to be, but for who we truly are. 1 year later, the annual Charlotte Architectural Design Awards were in full swing. The city's historic Belmont Hotel transformed into a glittering celebration of innovation and creativity. In the grand ballroom, beneath crystal chandeliers that cast dancing lights across the crowd, Naomi stood at the podium, her midnight blue gown shimmering as she addressed the audience. The Bennett Velez Foundation's first year has exceeded all our expectations, she said, her voice strong and clear. Together with Riverside Development and Velez Architecture, we've completed renovations on 5 community health centers, bringing modern healing spaces to communities that needed them most. From his seat at the front table, Mason watched her with undisguised pride. The past year had changed them both. Naomi's natural confidence had blossomed as her reputation in the industry grew. Her healthcare designs were now sought after across the country, and the foundation they'd built together was garnering national attention. Mason himself had found a new purpose. Stepping back from corporate leadership had freed him to focus on what really mattered, using his resources and connections to make a difference. Working alongside Naomi, he'd rediscovered the passion for design that had first drawn him to architecture. But tonight isn't about numbers or achievements, Naomi continued, her eyes finding Mason's in the crowd. It's about moments. Like the elderly woman who told us our redesigned waiting room was the first place she'd felt truly comfortable in years, or the child who said our pediatric clinic didn't feel scary anymore because we'd painted constellations on the ceiling. She touched the delicate ring on her left hand, a unique piece they'd designed together, featuring a small mask charm nested among the diamonds, not as a reminder of hiding, but of the night they'd first been brave enough to be real with each other. Someone very wise once told me that every space tells a story, Naomi said softly. Tonight I want to share a new story we're writing. The lights dimmed, and behind her, a projection appeared, renderings of their most ambitious project yet. A comprehensive medical center in Charlotte's most underserved neighborhood, featuring design elements from all their successful projects combined with innovative new concepts. The Clara Velez Memorial Medical Center, Naomi announced, her voice gentle as she revealed the name for the first time. In his seat, Mason's eyes filled with tears, but he was smiling. A place where healing spaces meet cutting-edge care, where design serves humanity, and where every detail is crafted with love. The audience erupted in applause, but Naomi wasn't finished. And speaking of love, her hand drifted to her stomach, where the smallest bump was just beginning to show beneath her gown. Mason and I are thrilled to announce that in about 6 months, we'll be welcoming our own little designer. The room exploded with cheers and congratulations. Mason was on his feet instantly, crossing to the podium to kiss his wife, as camera flashes captured the moment. But for them, the world had narrowed to just this. His hands cradling her face, her fingers gripping his lapels, their foreheads pressed together in their own private celebration. Later that night, they stood on their back porch, Mason's suit jacket draped over Naomi's shoulders, as they watched fireflies dance in their garden. The old Victorian house had evolved with them, each room now reflecting both their styles, their shared vision, their combined dreams. "Happy?" Mason asked, his hand resting protectively over her growing bump. Naomi leaned back against his chest. "Clara's project starts construction next month, the foundation's expanding to 3 new states, and this little one," she covered his hand with hers, "it feels like everything's falling into place. You know what this reminds me of?" "What?" "That first night you came here for dinner, when you asked me to tell you about Clara." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I never imagined then that you'd help me honor her memory in such a beautiful way. She's part of our story," Naomi said simply. "Just like the masks that brought us together, like the clinic where we fell in love, like every step that led us here." Mason turned her in his arms, studying her face in the soft porch light. "Sometimes I still can't believe you're real, that we're real." "Oh?" Naomi's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Should we put on masks again just to be sure?" He laughed, that full, warm laugh that had become so much more frequent this past year. "No more masks, just us." "Just us," she agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him, being brave enough to love. Above them, the stars twinkled like the chandeliers from that first magical night, but now they didn't need masks or pretense or carefully maintained distances. Now they had something better: truth, trust, and the beautiful reality of a love that had survived every test. A love that would soon have tiny footsteps echoing through their renovated halls, adding new chapters to their story, filling their carefully designed spaces with even more life and joy. Because sometimes the most beautiful designs aren't the ones we plan, but the ones that evolve naturally from 2 hearts brave enough to build something real together, something that lasts. The end. Based on the emotional story of Naomi and Mason, here's an impactful question. If you were in Naomi's shoes, would you have the courage to let go of a promising career and give up everything for love? Or would you have chosen the safe path by accepting the transfer to Seattle? Sometimes the most difficult choices are precisely those that can completely change the course of our lives, just as Naomi's did when she decided to follow her heart, even though she faced all the consequences. Have you ever had to choose between following your reason or your heart? What decision did you make and how did it impact your life? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.